Picture this for a second. A player who can hit a serve almost as hard as anyone on the entire WTA Tour, someone built like an athlete who should fear absolutely nothing standing across the net. And yet there is a name in this draw that seems to rattle her more than any radar gun ever could. And today, we are unpacking exactly why that is. Because buried inside the round of 64 bracket at the National Bank Open in Canada sits a matchup that has quietly become one of the most fascinating storylines of the entire North American hardcourt swing. And it centers on Alycia Parks, the powerful, unseeded American with a cannon for a serve, squaring off against a rising 25 seed who, for reasons we are about to dig into, seems to already live rent-free in Parks's head. And before you roll your eyes at the idea that a professional athlete could be intimidated by anyone, let's slow down and actually think about what fear looks like at the elite level of tennis. Because it is almost never about brute force or crowd noise or nerves before a big stage. It is something quieter and far more dangerous. It is the sinking feeling you get when you already know, deep down, that the person on the other side of the net has your number, that they have seen your best weapons up close and found a way through them before. And once that feeling takes root, it does not just disappear because a new tournament rolls around or a new city hosts the draw. So to understand how we got here, we actually need to rewind the calendar all the way back to January, back to the very first round of the Australian Open in Melbourne, because that is where this rivalry, if we can even call it that yet, first ignited. And if you only glanced at the final score from that day, you would assume it was a fairly routine outing for the American. 3 sets, Parks victorious, 6 games to love in the first, 3-6 in the second, 6-2 in the third, on paper that reads like a stumble followed by a comeback. The kind of match that gets forgotten within a week. But anyone who actually watched that first set knows it was anything but routine. Because what happened in those opening 30 minutes was not just a loss of a set. It was a full-blown dismantling, a grand slam bagel delivered to one of the most feared servers in the sport. And when we say bagel in tennis, we mean exactly what it sounds like. 0 games. Nothing. A shutout at the highest level of the game. And for a player like Parks, whose entire identity on court is built around dictating play, around blasting first strikes that opponents simply cannot handle, getting completely shut out in a set is not just a bad scoreline, it is a genuine psychological gut punch. It is the sport whispering in your ear that the thing you rely on most, the thing that has carried you through match after match, is suddenly being read like an open book by the person across the net. And that is precisely what happened in Melbourne. The rising Filipina talent, fueled by a home continent crowd that adored her underdog run, turned in a masterclass of returning and defensive baseline play that left Parks scrambling, second-guessing her footwork, and visibly rattled. Now to Parks's credit, she did not fold. She showed real grit, clawing her way back to win the next 2 sets, and ultimately close out the match. And on the surface that looks like a story of resilience, a champion digging deep and finding a way. But here is the thing about a scar like that first set bagel. It does not just wash away with a good night's sleep or a positive post-match interview. It lingers. It sits quietly in the back of your mind. And when Alycia Parks looks across the net at this same opponent months later here in Canada, she is not simply seeing the 25th seed on a scoreboard. She is seeing the ghost of that opening set in Melbourne. She is seeing proof, real tangible proof, that this player can take her off her game entirely if given the smallest opening, and that is exactly where fear starts to breed in professional sports. Not from the crowd, not from the occasion, but from history, from knowing precisely what your opponent is capable of doing to you when the conditions align. And once you understand that emotional backdrop, the numbers from that Melbourne clash start to hit even harder. Because this was not some fluke bagel followed by an easy path to victory for Parks. This was a genuinely tight, statistically brutal battle from start to finish. Let's talk serve numbers first, because that is the heart of Parks's entire game. She landed 12 aces that day, which sounds impressive on its own and honestly is. That kind of firepower is rare on tour. But sitting right alongside those 12 aces were 10 double faults. 10 free points just handed over to her opponent without a fight. And if you want to understand Alycia Parks as a tennis player in one single stat line, the duality tells you everything. She is high risk and high reward in the most literal sense. When her mechanics are clean and her rhythm is locked in, she is close to unplayable. But the moment pressure creeps in, the moment an opponent refuses to back down and keeps returning everything with interest, her technique can waver just enough to open the floodgates. Now flip the lens over to her opponent's side of that same match, and you find a completely different kind of performance, only a single ace the entire match. This is not a player who is going to blow you off the court with pace. Her game is built on something else entirely, and that something else showed up in a statistic that should honestly stop you in your tracks. 17 breakpoint opportunities created across those 3 sets. 17? Think about that for a moment. If your entire game plan revolves around holding serve and dictating with power, handing your opponent 17 realistic chances to break you is not just a bad afternoon. It is a structural crack in the foundation. She converted 4 of those 17 chances, which allowed Parks to survive. But the sheer volume of pressure applied throughout that match tells you this was not a player who got lucky or rode a hot streak for one set. This was a player who saw the Parks serve with total clarity and kept pulling at that thread relentlessly for nearly 3 full hours. And here is maybe the single most telling number from the entire encounter. The one stat that really exposes just how close this match actually was beneath the surface of that final scoreline. Alycia Parks won the match, but she did not win more points. Her opponent actually finished with 83 total points won compared to Parks's 81. And if you have ever watched enough tennis, you know this happens occasionally. Usually, when one player completely runs away with a single set, the way that opening bagel unfolded. But it always leaves the winner with a strange, hollow kind of victory. Because when you sit down afterward with your coaching staff and look at a stat sheet that says you won the match but actually lost the overall point battle, you know exactly what that means. You know you were outplayed for large stretches of that contest, and you know, whether you say it out loud or not, that you got away with one, and that quiet acknowledgement, that private admission that your opponent was arguably the better player for most of the match, is exactly the kind of thing that festers in an athlete's mind. It becomes fertile ground for doubt, and doubt is the single most dangerous opponent any professional athlete will ever face. So now let's shift gears and actually dig into the tactical picture, because beyond the psychological layer, there is a genuine stylistic puzzle here that makes this matchup fascinating on pure tennis merits alone. This 25 seed, let's just call her Alex for simplicity, is a product of an incredibly disciplined development system, and her maturity and shot selection on court far exceed what you would expect from someone still building her ranking. Being a left-hander gives her an immediate geometric edge, especially on the advantage side of the court, where so many of the most crucial points in a match tend to get played. That unusual angle throws off the rhythm of right-handed opponents who are used to a completely different spin and trajectory coming at them in those big moments. And Alex leans into that advantage constantly, using a heavy, looping lefty forehand to drag opponents wide and open up the court for her next shot. Parks, by contrast, prefers to plant her feet and drive the ball flat with pure pace. She wants quick exchanges. She wants to end points early with sheer velocity. And that style simply does not mesh well against someone who can absorb pace and redirect it right back down the line with heavy top spin. Alex's ability to neutralize velocity rather than match it is precisely the kind of stylistic kryptonite that turns a power player's biggest weapon into a liability. And now factor in the actual playing conditions here in Canada, because the hard courts at this tournament tend to play relatively fast. which in theory should favor a big serving American looking to end points quickly. Faster courts generally mean faster, more effective serves, but there is a wrinkle here too. These same courts also tend to reward elite movement and counterpunching because the ball sits up just enough for a player with sharp anticipation to get a clean strike on it. And anticipation happens to be one of Alex's greatest strengths. Her court coverage is exceptional. She reads shots early. She defends corners with relentless energy. And she transitions from pure defense into offense almost seamlessly. Which means if Parks cannot find a way to hit cleanly through the court, if her biggest, most aggressive shots keep coming back with pace attached, she is going to be forced into taking smaller and smaller margins on every single shot. And that kind of pressure is exactly the recipe for unforced errors piling up in bunches. There is also a broader storyline swirling around this particular section of the draw that adds even more weight to the occasion. Because whoever survives this early round matchup is already staring down a potential third-round collision with the number 8 seed. A recent Wimbledon champion, and the tennis world has already started buzzing about that potential showdown. Fans are talking about it, analysts are previewing it, and for Alex, currently sitting as the 25th seed, with a first-round bye already banked, this tournament represents a golden opportunity to stake her claim as a legitimate top-tier contender heading into the back half of the season. She arrives fresh, she arrives confident, and she arrives fully aware that a deep run here in Canada could end up being the defining stretch of her entire year. For Parks, the emotional framing could not be more different. She is unseeded here. She is fighting to protect and rebuild her ranking. And she is trying to prove, both to the tour and to herself, that her explosive brand of tennis can consistently translate into deep tournament runs at this elite level. And on top of all of that, she now finds herself standing directly in the path of a rising star that the entire tennis media apparatus is actively rooting for. When you stack all of these layers together, the lingering memory of that Melbourne bagel, the 17 break points she survived by the skin of her teeth, the uncomfortable truth that she lost the overall points battle in their only previous meeting, and now the added weight of blocking a heavily anticipated future showdown, the mental climb facing Alycia Parks in this match becomes genuinely steep. So let's get into the actual keys to victory here, because both players have a very clear blueprint they need to follow if they want to walk away with the win. For Parks, everything starts and ends with her first serve percentage. She simply cannot afford to hover in that 50 to 60% range that invites her opponent to step inside the baseline and start dictating rallies from the return position. She needs to be landing somewhere north of 65% to keep any pressure off her second serve. And just as important, she has to prioritize placement over raw power. A serve clocked at 120 miles per hour means absolutely nothing if it lands in the middle of the box against a returner with this level of anticipation. She needs to work her spots, use a wide slider to pull a lefty off the court, and open up the rest of the court for a follow-up shot. And above everything else, she has to clean up those double faults. 10 unforced service errors in a 3-set match is simply not sustainable against elite competition at this level of the tour beyond the serve. During baseline exchanges, Parks needs to be the one initiating aggression, but with controlled intent, rather than pure recklessness. She cannot allow herself to get dragged into long, grinding rallies where that heavy lefty top spin slowly breaks down her technique shot by shot. Instead, she needs to identify the first genuinely short ball in a rally and flatten out her strokes to take time away before her opponent can reset defensively on the other side of the net. The blueprint for Alex is built entirely around sustained, suffocating pressure. She already knows she holds a psychological edge in this particular matchup. She has broken that serve before, and she has the tape to prove it works. So her plan starts with return positioning, standing just half a step further back than usual on the first serve to guarantee she gets the ball back in play and can redirect it deep down the middle. Denying Parks any easy angle to work with early in the point, But on the second serve, the approach flips entirely. She needs to step well inside the baseline, take the ball early on the rise, and immediately put Parks on the back foot before the point even develops. She also needs to trust her fitness and lean heavily into that signature topspin forehand, targeting the backhand side over and over to keep the ball out of Parks's ideal strike zone. Because if she can consistently force high, shoulder-level backhands, the unforced errors will start to pile up naturally without her needing to hit a single outright winner. Ultimately, her entire game plan is about making the court feel smaller and smaller for her opponent, making every single winner feel like it requires a flawless shot rather than a comfortable one. Because when a big hitting player starts to feel that kind of suffocation, the margins shrink, the tension rises, and inevitably, those double faults start creeping back into the equation. And when you step back and look at the full picture here, this match becomes something far more interesting than just another early round contest buried in a massive draw. It becomes a genuine case study in the ongoing evolution of the women's game. On one side, you have the classic, overwhelming, power-based approach that Alycia Parks represents, the kind of first-strike tennis that has defined so many great champions before her. And on the other side, you have a modern, versatile, deeply tactical counterpunching style that seems built specifically to dismantle exactly that kind of game. The physical tools on both sides of the net are legitimately world-class in their own distinct ways. But this match is not going to be decided by who can simply hit the ball harder. It is going to be decided by who handles the mental and emotional friction better once the pressure starts to mount. Can Alycia Parks finally put the ghost of that Melbourne bagel behind her? Can she truly trust her own serve when the stakes get tight and the crowd noise rises? Or does Alex, riding the momentum of her higher seeding and the quiet confidence of already knowing she has cracked this particular code once before, walk onto the Canadian hard courts and deliver another tactical masterclass against the exact same opponent? The storyline suggesting that Alycia Parks carries some genuine trepidation into this matchup is not just a dramatic headline designed to generate clicks. It is a theory that is deeply rooted in cold, hard statistical reality from their one and only previous meeting. And in the stylistic collision, these two athletes represent every single time they share a court. Fear in competitive tennis is very real, and it does not show up as trembling hands or visible panic. It shows up in tight, hesitant footwork, in serves that lose their conviction at the worst possible moment, and in rushed decisions made under pressure that a calmer mind would never make. And very soon, we are going to find out exactly how much mental resilience Alycia Parks actually has stored up, and just how bright the immediate future looks for a 25 seed who seems to have already figured out one of the toughest puzzles on tour. So here is the real question heading into this one. Does the psychological edge belong entirely to the higher seed, walking in with confidence and history on her side? Or does Parks genuinely have enough firepower to simply serve her way out of trouble and silence every bit of this doubt in one afternoon? Drop your predictions down below. Let me know who you think handles the pressure when it actually matters. And stick around because there is a lot more tournament coverage coming as this draw continues to unfold in the days ahead.